Hey, I'm Tanner,
And I'm Allie.
and we are the Kalinas. And today we want to talk to you about how to date freely so that you can discern well while you're dating. So, in past relationships, I was always really afraid that I had to do the right thing in the right way at the right time, and I could at any moment my relationship could unfold if I were to mess up. And that created a lot of pressure because I think oftentimes as Catholics, as Christians, we hear that the point of dating is marriage, and that creates a lot of pressure. So our first thing that we want to say in order to help free you up is that the point of dating is not marriage. The point of dating is discernment. And yes, you are discerning, is this person right for me to marry? But you're really discerning, am I able to take the next step? And that really frees you up. When we focus on the end goal too much, it creates a lot of anxiety, a lot of pressure. And so just be focused on the next step as you're dating. Am I free to take the next step with this person? If so, then take that next step. And if you ever reach a point where you realize that you shouldn't take the next step, then it's okay to tell the other person, hey, this isn't right, and I wish you the best.
So when you go into dating, like Tanner said, it is a discernment. And in order to discern well, you need to know your desires when it comes to dating. Sometimes that kind of seems like an abstract thing in our head, like, oh, I'm going to date somebody and I have all these desires and they're just going to kind of unfold as I date people. But it's actually really important to have clear desires when you're dating. So I would even go as far to say is write your desires down, write them out so you actually know them and you can kind of hold yourself accountable to them as you're dating people. So that doesn't mean writing down oh, I hope the guy that I date is 6'1" and has brown hair and blue eyes and loves to go to the gym. Not desires like that.
I have blonde hair.
Your hair's brown.
You want someone else?
No, I just want you. But it's important to know your desires for how do I expect to be pursued by this man? Do I expect them to be clear about how they want to date me? Do I expect communication to be clear? When do I expect to kind of have a conversation about defining our relationship, things like that. It's important to know your desires.
If you're trying to enter into a relationship and hope that you discover what you desire, that very rarely ends well.
Yeah.
So know what you want and know what you want going into a relationship.
And that leads to our next point, which is be blunt and be very clear when you're in a relationship. Tanner and I have been just chatting about this a lot because we have a lot of friends who are dating right now. And one of the biggest things that kind of is make or break for a relationship is not being clear about what you desire. So actually verbalizing that to the other person kind of frees you to date them well and to discern that relationship well. So for example, if I give somebody, this is really important to me when it comes to dating and being really blunt about that to them, it kind of just leaves them with an option to say yeah, I actually agree with that, or no, I don't agree with that. Or if they aren't super blunt with their answer, you can usually tell by their body language, where they stand when it comes to that certain thing you bring up.
Yeah, and men, I'm going to call you out here. This really falls on us. We have the steering wheel in the relationship. It is really important that we take the initiative in being bold and clear and honest up front. For example, when we were dating, I had just taken her on a 5-course meal. Really, I took her to 5 different places. We got a little bite at each place, but altogether, it ended up being a 5-course meal, and it was just a lovely date. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, it was nighttime. We were in my car. There was a nice song playing, and we were both feeling it. And I had to be upfront and honest and say, hey, I want to kiss you, but making out, I can't do that. That does not end well. And so
And it wasn't because we were making out. This was before we even had our first kiss.
Yeah, and we ended up not kissing that night. But I needed to be upfront about what I desired in a relationship in order to protect myself and protect her and protect the dignity of this relationship. And so men, that falls on you. If you're expecting her to kind of speak up and you just kind of ride the coattails of that, that's not being bold. That's not steering the relationship.
Also, women really do desire to be pursued, and with being pursued, that means being led. And so if a girl feels like they have to be the one to bring up these really important topics and desires, they're going to feel like you're not leading them. And that's really, really disappointing in a relationship as a woman. You don't want to have to be initiating every single important conversation. A man who's pursuing you and intentionally taking you on dates should be the one to initiate those things.
Yeah. And women, this is not to let you off the hook either. If you find yourself in a relationship where the man's not being clear and you're having to take the steering wheel, then that might be your clue that you're not dating a man, you're dating a boy.
Yeah. And also, like, if you are the woman and you're having to take those steps, it's okay to express your frustration and your disappointment in them not doing that, right? So, like, if a man is not being intentional about, like, how he wants to date you or, like, when he's taking you on dates, then you have every right to kind of put the ball back in their court and be like, hey, like, I actually desire that you do this in this relationship. And eventually you'll get to a point where hopefully the communication gets better.
If that ultimately ends up breaking the relationship, then that's okay. It's better to dodge a bullet now than have a bomb explode later, which leads to our next point. In order to free us up, men, ladies and gentlemen, if you have to say the right thing to the other person, then they're not the right person for you. Okay? You do not have to say the right thing and try and keep this relationship intact and feel that pressure. You have the freedom to articulate your desires and articulate who you are. You're not Shakespeare. You're going to say awkward things at awkward times that aren't going to make sense totally. That's okay. That is okay.
I think there's a temptation early on in a relationship to kind of like pull back what your desires actually are, because you're afraid that that person might not receive it well, or maybe they're not on the same page as you. So you kind of like push them under the rug a little bit just to make sure like things can keep going smoothly. But I actually think that's like a huge problem, because eventually you're going to get into the relationship and maybe things have progressed like emotionally, and then you're going to share these desires and this person might not be on the same page as you. So to prevent that heartbreak, like bring it up sooner than later, because like what Tanner said is so true. If you are afraid of not saying the right thing, or like afraid of expressing a specific desire because you're afraid they're not on the same page, then like that's a good thing to do that right away so you don't waste your time.
Yeah, but if you have been dating someone for a while and you're in the middle of a relationship where you recognize maybe you haven't been clear in certain areas and you desire to be clear now, it is never too late.
Yeah.
It is never too late to reassert your desires, but that also calls you to have discipline, because if you state your desires and then you go against what you said, then the other person is going to lose respect for you. So it's important that as you state what you want in a relationship, that you do what you said.
Yeah, you stand by that. And like if you, like Tanner said, if you're in a relationship and maybe you've like, you know, compromised on some of these desires and you bring them up and the person you're dating is like, actually, yeah, I really desire that too. I think you can really work from that place if you both desire to grow. But if you state your desires and you're like a year into a relationship and that person is really not on the same page as you, try really hard and fight really hard to not be blinded by your emotions of that relationship, because you deserve to be with somebody who has the same desires as you when it comes to dating. So surround yourself with good people who can hold you accountable to those desires, and if they're not the right person, that they can be supportive to you if you do need to make a change.
And we've been talking a lot about stating our desires. Again, this is not to say that like she has to be 5'7", blonde hair.
Right.
You're 5'2", 5'3".
5'3¼
Okay, yeah. But like stating your desires about what you want a relationship to look like. Again,
Right.
this goes back to like the very beginning. What we said is that as you're dating, you're discerning. And what do you want in a relationship? Do you want holiness to be the kind of centerpiece of it? Do you want a woman who pursues God? Do you want to bring God into that relationship? Do you want to be able to talk about spiritual things?
Yeah.
These kinds of desires, more so than just the materialistic surface level desires.
Yeah, and I do think that sometimes the like practical desires can play into it as well. So like, you know, do I desire a guy that like really prioritize like stability in his life? Because if I want that from my future spouse, like I better be dating somebody who also prioritizes that. Right?
Yeah. Or do I desire to live in the South? Or do I desire to live in the North? Those are kind of important desires.
Definitely.
Yeah.
You definitely should not ignore those desires.
And you definitely shouldn't bring those up maybe in the first few days.
Yeah. What Tanner and I are trying to say is that when you're early on in a relationship, you don't need to be saying, I want 7 kids and for my wife to be a stay-at-home mom and all of these things, you know?
But
Like
you
those
should be stating your desires of like, I don't want a relationship to include this type of physicality. Or,
Right. Like I really desire for chastity to be a part of my relationship. I desire that this man is going to lead me well, and this is what that looks like to me.
And then as you discern to take the next step, then you can start to bring in some of these other desires that you have, such as like what you want your family to look like one
Yes.
day. And yeah, but it's all a discernment and taking the next step,
Yeah.
which is why dating, that's the point of dating, is to
Yes.
discern, hey, should we take the next step here?
Right. And I think, like Tanner and I have been saying this whole video, like early on, the best thing you can do is to be clear and bold about your intentions, because it really does free you up to know what the other person's desires are, and also to like love them and pursue them in that way if it is like working out.
Basically, all that we talked about today, all these points kind of converge in the same message, which is be true to yourself and be true to God. If you do that and the other person likes it, then hey, you found yourself a partner. If you do that and the other person doesn't like it, then you did not find yourself a partner. And if you do that and the other person likes it, but you find yourself reaching a point where you don't want to take the next step, then you did not find yourself a partner. But you need to trust the process and trust that in being clear and being upfront, being bold, will eventually land you a partner if it's in the Lord's plan. Just continue to stay true to yourself and continue to stay true to God.
Yeah, being wishy-washy about what you want gets you nowhere.
And if you find that you do this and relationships kind of keep falling apart, then stay true to the process. You might be one of those people like me who you just have to look more than the average person looks to find their spouse. But stay true to the process. If it's in the Lord's plan, then it's going to happen. So if you like this video, please dialogue with us in the comments. We want to hear your thoughts on this. We want to hear what frees you up. And we want to hear what holds you back in your relationship, what causes anxiety. So yeah, we thank you for watching this.
Like and subscribe below. I feel like that's what everyone does.